And just so that you can put your finger on what phase alignment does and it means, basically, by virtue of placing your satellites and the subwoofer, they're not going to be in the same position. So your subwoofer is not lined up with the front of your satellite speakers. And because of that, when the sound waves leave both the satellites and the subwoofer, because of this offset placement, they're not necessarily going to be in phase with each other. And what happens when sound waves, especially lower frequency sound waves, are out of phase? They tend to cancel each other out, which will make your bass frequencies either inaudible or a lot weaker than what they're supposed to be. So they usually put a phase switch on subwoofers when you can flip the phase of the sound waves coming out of the subwoofer, and by doing that a bit more well align it with the sound waves that are coming out of your satellites. And to show that to you quickly in more of a visual setup, what I'm gonna do is just record a quick sine wave from an external source. Okay, so that's a good start. I'm gonna record enable this. This is a very simple sine wave from a digital oscillator, so it should be fairly precise. I'm gonna record a good chunk of it. Okay, that should do. So let's look into it from closer. Yeah, so that's a pretty clean sine wave. So let's name this track subwoofer. And then let's duplicate it. And let's name this one satellite. Let's solo both of them. And let's bring up a limiter. And I'm going to use the Pro L2 because it shows in a pretty good visual representation the audio level, what's coming out. Okay, so this Pro L2 is on the master track. So both of the subwoofer and the satellites sine wave signals are going through it at the same time. Okay, so as you can see, I'm going to turn off the grid by hitting Control M4 so I can move these easily. Now, as you can see, the two sound waves are perfectly aligned with each other. As a matter of fact, right now, they're amplifying each other. So if you look at the Pro L2, I'm just going to listen to the subwoofer only. That's the audio level. And I'm going to add the satellite. As you can see, it's a lot louder. In fact, it's about 6 dBs louder because they are amplifying each other. It more or less doubles the sound. Now, this is our audio level currently. Let's see what happens when I start moving one of the waves out of alignment with the other one. The audio level dropped. Let's move it even more out of alignment, or out of phase if you will. Even lower audio level. Now it's barely audible. And if I was able to dial in a point where they perfectly overlap each other, but they have different phases, then eventually the sound would actually disappear. They can cancel each other out completely. Somewhere there. So if you look on the track volume meter of the individual tracks, so the subwoofer is generating sound, the satellites are generating sound, but because they are completely out of phase with each other, they're canceling each other out and nothing gets to the master track. or our limiter. And when I start moving this back into phase, the volume slowly starts coming back. Higher, higher. Until we put it back into perfect phase, which will give us the original volume. So that's how phase cancellation and phase amplification works. And it is relevant to us because this is especially prevalent in the low frequency range. So if your subwoofer happens to be far enough away from your speakers so as that it creates a sound wave that happens to reach the sound waves coming from the speakers out of phase, then the low frequency sounds might cancel each other out and you might end up with a very weak bass despite of having a big ass 10-inch subwoofer on your floor. So to battle that, there is this 180-degree phase switch. On some subwoofers they give you more options, 90, 180, 270. First of all, what needs to be understood is that what we did here was one sine wave at one frequency. One sine wave at one frequency. What's coming out of your subwoofer and your satellites those are waves that are so complex that they have really nothing to do with one sine wave at one frequency. So while this demonstration was a cool way to show you how phase cancellation works, in the real world, this is a heck of a lot more complicated. So you're never gonna get, a disappearing bass because you put your subwoofer in the wrong position. It might give you a bit of a weaker or a bit of a more pronounced bass response, but due to the very complex nature of the sound that's coming out of your speakers, this switch is not something that's going to fix all your issues. It's something that's going to mitigate them to maybe dial down the severity, if you will.